Hey everyone, Sky here to discuss Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, starring Leonardo DiCaprio, Brad Pitt, Margot Robbie, Timothy Olyphant, Kurt Russell, and Al Pacino, and directed by Quentin Tarantino. Now, I only saw this movie the one time, and I'm going to plan on seeing it a second time. I just don't know when. But I just thought, you know what, I should get this review out of the way, so let's get into the movie. The movie opens with a clip from an old Western TV series called Bounty Law, where the star of the show, Rick fucking Dalton, played by Leonardo DiCaprio, who is playing a character named Jake Cahell, a renegade bounty hunter, and both Rick and his stunt double Cliff Booth, played by Brad Pitt, get interviewed about what Cliff does for Rick, which is essentially carrying Rick's load. And I really like these two together. And fun fact, they got along really well for making this movie together, and Mr. Tarantino did a great job making these characters likable. The date is Saturday, February 8th, 1969. And Rick and Cliff are in a restaurant where Rick meets a producer named Marvin Schwartz, played by Al Pacino, who's a fan of Rick's work after seeing a double feature presentation of Rick's where he's playing an action star, for example, where he is a GI that incinerates Nazi, I'm going to just quote Brad Pitt on this, Nazi bastards, or Bostons, with the flamethrower, in which he killed, and we'll see him use it later in the movie, and that callback is great. Marvin also brings up a cheesy music video Rick was featured in was rather amusing. Bounty Law has since been canceled because of Rick's ongoing alcoholism, which is also why Cliff is his driver. Rick is booked a gig as a villain on the series Lancer, and Marvin thinks Rick should fly to Rome and shoot spaghetti westerns. And Pacino is great in this movie, and I like the restaurant scene goes, and I think the restaurant scene goes a little bit too long, despite it's a good scene. But this is a long movie. Maybe 15 minutes could be cut out, but I'm still having a good time. Rick complains and cries to Cliff about how this means that his career is going downhill, and he's now a has-been. Cliff drives Rick home, and as he gets home, they learn Rick's new neighbors are director Roman Polanski, played by Rafael Zuraka, forgive me if I said that wrong, and his wife, rising starlet Sharon Tate, played by Margot Robbie, who's very good in this movie. Rick's mood turns around since he thinks that a big-time director like Roman Polanski, who was hot off directing this movie. Now, if anybody doesn't know what the fuck I'm talking about with that poster right there, that was Rosemary's Baby, which I've never seen to this day, confessionably, can help reinvigorate his career as Rick rehearses his lines for Lancer for the night. Cliff drives home to his trailer where he lives with his dog Brandy, and can I just say, I love Brandy in this movie, and her smart tricks, and it will pay off at the end of the movie, and I will talk about it. Roman Polanski brings Sharon to a party at the Playboy Mansion where they meet with their friends, Jay Sebring, played by Emile Hirsch, who I reviewed him before and he does damn good work here. Steve McQueen, played by Damian Lewis from a Stephen King movie called, and Michelle Phillips, played by Rebecca Rittenhouse, as Sharon goes to dance with, which Margot Robbie, in my opinion, is so attractive. She pulls off the scenes where she dances very well. Meanwhile, Steve McQueen talks to Connie Stevens, played by Dreama Walker, forgive me if I said that wrong, about how he notices Sharon is using Polanski to make Jay jealous. in which I didn't get the impression of, and I didn't get the impression they were in love. I will admit that right off the bat. And Connie thinks Sharon has a type, which is short men that look like 12-year-old boys. And honestly, I like being in this world, but the script is not gold like these two movies. But it is a pretty damn good script. But this is neither Pulp Fiction or Django whatsoever. On Sunday, February 9th, 1969, after Polanski leaves, Sharon hangs out with Jay at her house, and who comes by the house looking for the previous owner? Charles Manson, played by Damon Harriman, who was trying to see his friends, and Jay answers Polanski's door and says he has the wrong house, and this actor who plays Manson looks the part, and the audience doesn't see too much of him. And as soon as I don't see him for the rest of the movie, as the movie was over, I was a little disappointed because I thought this movie would get to the horrific murders of Sharon Tate because of him. But I'll get more to that at the end. Cliff brings Rick to the set of Lancer for the day's shoot. He goes back to Rick's house after he asks Cliff to fix the antenna in his roof, and sees Manson as he leaves and smiles and waves at Cliff, and that shot was just fucking creepy. We go to a flashback of Rick talking to an old friend, Randy, played by Kurt Russell, who talks Rick into getting Cliff a gig. Randy reluctantly agrees, since it was rumored Cliff murdered his wife, Billy, played by Rebecca Gayheart, and got away with it. And this story was really fucking hard to understand, but the alleged incident is shown on a boat where Billy was nagging Cliff endlessly, but it cuts away before we see if Cliff really shoots Billy with the harpoon gun. And that's gonna have to take me a second viewing to realize that. And honestly, it should have been a mystery, and that should have been cut out of this movie, in my opinion. Randy brings Cliff to the set, where he meets Bruce Lee, played by Mike Moe, as he talks about wanting to fight boxer Muhammad Ali. I do like the scene as we're introduced to Bruce Lee, as he catches Cliff laughing and at what he's saying, and as he challenges him to a fight to see who knocks who on the ground first. Lee gets Cliff down first, and Cliff retaliates by grabbing Bruce Lee, and slamming him into a car, which was rather fucking hysterical, but not crack up funny. Cliff and Bruce Lee go hand to hand until Janet, played by Zoe Bell, who's Randy's wife, and fellow stunt coordinator, comes in and is pissed to see Cliff and Bruce Lee fighting, and the huge dent that Cliff left on the car. And suddenly he's fired, and it's not as classic of a scene as the Bonnie situation in Pulp Fiction. Sharon goes to the local movie theater and sees that a film she is featured in, called The Wrecking Crew, is playing. She goes to the box office and asks for a ticket, but then asks if she gets privileges for starring in the film. The manager comes out and recognizes Sharon from Valley of the Dolls, and he invites her in, and I love the way that scene was directed, and the cinematography in this movie feels Hollywood, and I love that. Throughout the film, Sharon listens to the audience's enthusiastic reactions to her performance with laughter and cheering at the right moments, and I like how Sharon listens to people reacting with her character. It shows a good comedic time for an actress to watch her character. Meanwhile, Rick goes through his hair and makeup for Lancer. He then sits down next to his 8-year-old co-star, Trudy, played by Julia Butters, who is a method actor, and I like her in this movie as she reads an autobiography about Walt Disney, which I found funny because of these two movies competing on the Cinerama Dome 70mm prints of the films. Because Tarantino blamed Star Wars for, well, not Star Wars, but Disney for putting Star Wars in the Cinerama Dome instead of the Hateful Eight. While Rick smokes a cigarette near her, which is pretty fucking dangerous, just smoke in front of kids, Rick has a small breakdown over his perceived decline of stardom. Shooting begins, and Rick works with the series lead actor James Stacy, played by Timothy Olyphant, who plays protagonist Johnny Madrid. And during a take, Rick forgets his lines due to being drunk as he goes to his trailer and has a meltdown, but then vows to do better, and that was a smart choice by Leo and Mr. Tarantino filming that scene. Cliff drives home from Rick's place and sees a hitchhiker named Pussycat, that's what her name is, played by Margaret Qualley, whom Cliff noticed throughout the weekend. He finally picks her up and agrees to take her to the Spawn Ranch, where Cliff used to shoot films with Rick, and I thought, holy motherfucking shit, he's dead now. When they get there, Cliff sees the place is become some kind of commune for hippies, mostly consisting of women, and I thought, yep, he's fucked. Pussycat tells Cliff that he should stick around to meet Manson, Charles Manson otherwise, and I thought, please don't, just get the fuck out of there. But he wants to speak with the ranch's elderly owner, George Spahn, played by Bruce Stern. The women warn Cliff that Spahn is sleeping, but he goes over to his house anyways. He is met by Lynette Squeaky Frame, played by Dakota Fanning, who also retrieves that Spahn is asleep. And because she just had sex with him, and I think, ew, because he's like 10 times older than she is. But at the same time, it might take me 2 viewings to find that shit out. It's never clear in the first viewing. Cliff goes to wake Spahn up, but he doesn't recognize Cliff since he's blind. He asks Spahn if the women there are taking advantage of him, but Spahn denies it, excuse me very much, and tells Cliff to leave. Cliff goes outside and sees one of the male hippies stuck a knife in his front tire, and he gets his stuff out and orders the man to fix it, but is given a fuck you. As Cliff responds by decking the guy hard in the face 3 fucking times in front of the other women, which was pretty damn violent. But hey, it's Mr. Tarantino at best, so I forgive it. I like the scene. They run to get Tex Watson, played by Austin Butler, but Cliff is already driving away by the time he gets out of there, and we'll see them again later at the end. This scene will pay off then. I'm not saying that I'm convinced by that. Back to on the Lancer set, Rick shoots a scene where he has Trudy's character in Scott Lancer, who's played by Wayne Maunder and is really played by Luke Perry, comes to intervene. Rick improvises his slimy villain character and has a moment where he throws Trudy off of him, and that's great acting by both Rick and Leo. After the take, he is praised by both the director and Trudy, who tells Rick that was the best acting she has ever seen in her life. As he he's moved by the comment, Rick to tears, and I love how that scene played out by the actors, and that scene is very well played, I must say. 6 months later, a voiceover from Randy states Kurt and Cliff ending up flying to Rome to shoot the spaghetti western films. While there, Rick met and married Italian film actress Francesca Capucci, played by a very unrecognizable Lorenza Izzo, who was Eli Roth's wife. I don't know about now, but because I think I heard that they were getting a divorce or something. And I like that Rick became a famous actor by doing spaghetti westerns. On August 8th, 1969, Rick and Cliff have returned to Los Angeles, but now feel that it is time for them to go their separate ways. They spend one last night having drinks and hang out at Rick's house with Francesca. Meanwhile, Sharon, now very pregnant, is having a small gathering with Jay and their friends, who is Wojciech Frykowski, forgive me if I said that wrong, played by Costa Ronan, and Abigail Folger, played by Samantha Robinson. And I personally think the Rick and Cliff scenes were more entertaining at this point than the Sharon scenes. Cliff takes out a cigarette he bought from Pussycat earlier in the film that was dipped in acid, and he proceeds to smoke it to trip out, which was fucking hilarious. Outside, Tex drives in front of the houses with the fellow family members, Patricia Krenwinkel, played by Katie, a.k.a. Katie, played by Madison Beatty, Susan Atkins, a.k.a. Sadie, played by Mikey Madison, and Linda Kasabian, a.k.a. Flower Child, played by Ethan Hawke's daughter, Maya. They arrive with the intention of killing Sharon and her friends, but here's the twist. A drunk Rick comes out and angrily yells at them because their car's busted muffler is making too much noise, which is understandable at midnight. He orders them to leave, even as Katie appears to be reaching her gun, but Tex drives away. At the bottom of the hill, the four recognize Rick from TV, and Sadie suggests that they kill him and whoever else is in his house. The others agree, but as they start walking there, Flower Child says she forgot her knife. Tex gives her the car keys to get it, but she ends up ditching them and driving away. Then the three proceed to carry over their plan, and honestly, I like that twist from Inglourious Bastards much better than this. The trio walk up to Rick's house. Tex and Katie break in through the front, where Sadie goes in through the back. Or the side, excuse me. Cliff sees them, but because he's tripping balls, he is neither frightened nor absolutely certain of what he is seeing, even as Tex draws his gun on Cliff, and I thought, oh shit, he's definitely fucked. Cliff instead sicks brandy on Tex, who viciously chomps in the Tex's arm and groin, and I thought, ow, god damn, that's gotta fucking hurt. Sadie tries to run up to Cliff with her knife, but he chucks a can of dog food at her, which smashes her fucking face, and what gets more brutal is Cliff stomps on Tex's face and before grabbing Sadie and brutally smashing her fucking face against the hard furniture until she's dead. Brandy gets a few bites into Sadie as well, but she runs out flailing and shrieking into the pool, where Rick is lounging, excuse me. He then comes out with his flamethrower and tortures Sadie, who burns to death in his pool. In the chaos, Cliff gets shot, but not fatally. That was my favorite scene in the whole movie because it's brutal and it's Mr. Tarantino at best. Paramedics and police arrive at the scene. Cliff is taken to the hospital and for his injuries, while Francesca is freaked the fuck out by the ordeal. After Rick says goodbye to Cliff, he sees Jay calling to him from Sharon's gate. Rick explains what happened, and Jay recognizes Rick from TV. Jay tells Sharon who her neighbors is, and they invite him over to come and have a drink. Rick agrees, and he finally meets Sharon and her friends when the credits roll, and I thought this would be about Charles Mountain killing Sharon Tate. And I was wrong. I was a little disappointed, but in a way I was kind of glad because those murders are vicious. During the credits, Rick talks about Red Apple cigarettes as it was a commercial, which I liked, but I loved But what I loved was the Batman theme song at the end of the credits. I thought that was pretty clever. Now it's time for the rating. I'll give this movie a 8.0 out of 10. Not as good as his other movies directed by Mr. Tarantino, except for Kill Bill, Death Proof, and Four Rooms. It's better than those for damn sure, but this movie was pretty good. But this would be the least great movie by Mr. Tarantino, in my opinion, by the way. And the cinematography did make the movie feel Hollywood, and I love that. And I like the performances, but if I were to watch this again, it would be on rare occasions, I should say. So I'd like to thank you guys for joining me for this whole Quentin Tarantino movie, and until he comes back with his 10th film, and action.